everyone, and welcome back to Mariana Mas Books. Today I am super excited because I have for you my Shorty September TBR. Shorty September is the coolest readathon in town, and if you want evidence for that, I am going to submit for you guys. There is a zine. There is a zine with the prompts. You can print it out and fill it out, and it doesn't get much cooler than that. First, Shorty September is a readathon that goes on in September. This is the third year, and it is to read short books. So books under 200 pages. It was created by Sian and Bert at Storytime and Heather at Soggy Expat Book Nerd. She designs collage stuff every year for the prompts, but this year she outdid herself and she did an actual zine that if you go to her video that I will of course link for you guys, you can print out. I do wish and hope that I will read every single book in this TBR. They are shorties, so it should be plausible, and also I have several options for each prompt, but I'm only going to show you one. I wrote down the prompts. They are not in order from the zine. When I put the zine together, I realized that I wrote them down in a different order, but doesn't matter. I'm just going to read my list. The first prompt is Pedro Pascal shorts, and that is an unexpected purchase, and I knew right away what I wanted to read, and for this one I want to read Walking Distance by Lizzie Stewart, a shorty as you can see, and this is actually an illustrated essay about walking, and specifically women walking. I'm not sure if it's about in general women walking or if it's most about the author and her walks. Either of those sounds like something I would love to read, and this is, as I said, illustrated. So Walking Distance by Lizzie Stewart. The next prompt is Dolphin shorts, and that is a book with water on the cover, and this is the only prompt I'm going to show you two books for because I cannot decide which I want more, and both are actually rereads. The first one is a poetry collection, and it is called Una ballena es un país by Isabel Zapata. This one is unfortunately not translated to English, but it is a collection of poems about animals. The title would translate as A Whale is a Country, and so every poem is about a different animal, and as you can see there is water in the cover. This is one of my favorite poetry collections, so I would like to reread it. And then the other reread is The Big Wave by Pearl S. Buck, and I want to reread that one because I read it when I was in second grade. When I was in second grade, I lived in Brookline, Massachusetts. As you know, I'm from Mexico and live in Mexico, and I think I say it in every video, but I lived in Brookline, Massachusetts, and in school I read The Big Wave by Pearl S. Buck, and I remember that being the first book with an angsty, sad feeling, and I remember falling in love with that feeling of suffering with a book. If that makes sense, but I have never read it since, and I've always been curious to reread it. That one is about two Japanese kids who live in different islands, and there is a tsunami, and that is all I remember. I just remember it being sad and involving a tsunami. So that is my two options for Dolphin shorts. The next prompt is Shorty Shorts, and that is a 70s or 80s book. The creators of the readathon say that they mean a book written and published in the 70s and 80s, but you can read something set in the 70s and 80s. But I'm going for published in the 80s. So this was published, I think, in 1981, I believe. And it is Battles in the Desert by José Emilio Pacheco. I have an edition in Spanish that has a name tag, as you can see, because this is also a reread. And this one I read when I was in 9th grade in school, and I haven't read it since, and I've always wanted to reread it. And this one is a Mexican classic. I say classic because it's from the 80s, so it doesn't necessarily count as a classic, but it's also not a modern classic because it's too contemporary to be considered a modern classic, but not contemporary enough to be considered a contemporary novel. But it's a classic because in terms of Mexican literature, José Emilio Pacheco is a very well-known author, and this book specifically is considered like a classic of Mexican literature. And I remember loving this book. This book is set in Mexico City in the 50s, actually. And it is about two boys who become friends, and they are on different social and economic circumstances, and it's about their friendship and about one of the boys falling in love with the other boy's mom, and it's kind of like this discovering of love and lost at a young age. If you're interested, there is a very beautiful edition by New Directions that is recently released, and this one actually inspired me to create one prompt that is not part of the official prompt, but there is a prompt in the readathon which I will talk later, which is about reading a book and then watching the movie. And so I decided to make a prompt that is read a book and then listen to the song. And I specifically created that prompt because there is a song based on this book by a very, very famous alternative rock Mexican band called Café Tacuba. And so I know the song very well, I know the lyrics to the song, but I haven't read this book in a while. So I want to reread this book and then listen to the song and understand the lyrics fully. The next prompt is half and half shorts, and that is read a book and then watch the movie. And for this one, I'm going to be reading Novecento by Alessandro Baricco. Alessandro Baricco is an Italian writer, and I unfortunately didn't find this translated to English, but there are other books by this author translated to English. So if you're interested in him, you can Google the books that are translated. This one is translated to Spanish, and it is the story of a pianist who was born in a ship, and all his life he lives aboard the ship, and he's the pianist aboard the ship. And there is a movie that is excellent and very emotional. The movie is called The Legend of 1900. And it's been really long since I watched that movie, and I had no idea that there was a book. I was randomly looking at my sister's bookshelf and I came across this, and I thought, wait a minute, this is perfect for Shorty September. So I'm excited to read the book and then rewatch the movie. Then we have Spanx, and this is a book with magic or witchcraft. And actually, if you watched my previous video, you know that I am participating in a readathon called Short Story September, which I loved because I thought it would merge perfectly with Shorty September. So there are some stuff from that readathon that are going to work for Shorty September as well, and this is one of them. I'm going to be reading a collection called Ars Historica by Marie Brennan, and this is about historical fantasy. All the stories are historical fantasy. So there will be magic in this, but there's also a story about Saint Therese of Avila, who is a real-life saint, woman saint, and her death. And so I am venturing a guess that if there is a story about the death of a female saint, there is going to be witchcraft involved, I think. But there will be magic. Then we have Hoochie Daddy Shorts, and this is a spicy read. And as you know, I am a big romance reader, so of course I was going to pick a romance book for this prompt. But I wanted a book with a really raunchy, kitschy cover. I wanted a, naked man on the cover type book, because I feel like the kitschiness of that very well matches with the kitschiness of this prompt. And so I am going to be reading Bare Naked by Jessica Sims, which is a book with one of my favorite tropes, which is shifter romance. And this book is about werebears, as you can guess from the title of the book. There are men and women who transform into bears, and it's smutty and I'm sure funny because of the author, and I cannot wait to read this. And then we have Lodge Shorts, and this is a book you bought to look cool. And here, hear me out. The short books that I have bought to look cool are usually bought to look cool on BookTube, and because they are short, usually I read them right away. And I didn't want to buy another book, so I decided to shop my sister's bookshelf, because my sister reads a lot of books that I wouldn't read unless I was trying to look cool. And the book I chose is Vida Incompleta by Elena Arizmendi. I saw this book and I thought, Elena Arizmendi, pioneer of Mexican feminism, perfect for trying to look cool, right? And then I started to read up on this book, and I thought, one, it's perfect for this prompt, and two, I am stoked about reading it. Elena Arizmendi had the most interesting life. She was a nurse who created the White Cross organization during the Mexican Revolution, because apparently the Red Cross was refusing to give treatment to revolutionary soldiers, and so she created the White Cross to give attention to revolutionary soldiers. She then started a love affair with José Vasconcelos, who is a very prominent figure in Mexican politics and education, and he was a married man, and she used to be a married woman. So of course, for the 1910s, 20s, it's scandalous, and so she moved to New York, escaping the scandal. This book was printed in 1920 something, when she was living in New York. It was printed in a New York small press with a very small distribution, and it's a novel. It's kind of like autofiction, and this is a novel where she tells her version of the love affair. And so this is a very feminist book where she defends both her story and other women's stories, but it is a fiction, so it's kind of like autofiction. And as I said, it was originally printed in a New York press and with a small distribution in the 20s, but then it was recovered and reprinted in this edition in Mexico in 2012, I believe. And if all of that doesn't convince you that this is a book to read to try to look cool, and also because it's interesting, but I mean cool points, to further convince you, I will tell you that this book is not translated into English, which, makes it even cooler. So I'm sorry, I will tell you about it in the wrap up. Then we have Denim Shorts, and that is a modern classic, and I looked up the time for modern classic and there isn't a consensus, but the one I went with was a book published after World War I. And so for this one I picked 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair by Pablo Neruda. This one is a Spanish edition, but it is you can probably find it in English. So this one was published again in the 20s, and it is an absolute modern classic of poetry. I have never read Neruda before. I feel like this could also give me cool points, but I wanted to pick a different book for every prompt. So this one will be for Denim shorts. Then we have Mom Shorts, and that is a comfort read, and for this one I will be reading Dog Poems by Mary Oliver. I don't think there is much needed to say about why this would be a comfort read. It's a poetry collection all about dogs. Look at the cover, it's illustrated. Yes. Then we have Ripped Shorts, and that is a mystery or slasher. I have a lot of rereads in this list because for this one I chose Aura by Carlos Fuentes, and this one is translated as Aura, a novel, and it's available in English in Kindle. I checked. So this is by Carlos Fuentes, who is a Mexican author and is also very classic Mexican author. When was this published? Okay, I will put on the screen when this was published. This is a book about a writer. As you can see, I also read it in school. This is a book about a writer who moves into an old widow's creepy manor because she hires him to write the biography of her late husband. And when he arrives, there is a young woman who lives there, and she seems to be the niece of the old lady or something like that. But he realizes that there is something weird and strange and creepy going on with the young woman and with the old lady, and we don't know what that is. This is written in the second person, and it is creepy, eerie, ooky, spooky, mystery vibes. Then we have Elizabethan shorts, and for this one is a historical read, which most likely means a historical fiction read. But as you all know, I am co-hosting Historathon this year, which is a year-long reading event for reading historical non-fiction. So I will be reading a historical non-fiction. I couldn't help myself. And for this one, I'm going to be reading A Rebel Irish in New Spain by Andrea Martinez Barax. And this one is about, as the title suggests, an Irish rebel who was living in New Spain. New Spain is a territory of Mexico when it was a Spanish colony, and apparently this Irish rebel was an important figure in the Mexican independence movement, or a precursor of the movement, and he has a fascinating life from the synopsis of the book. And finally, we have Lederhosen, and this is a translated book. And for this, I went with an unconventional pick because I chose a picture book. And this is called Irma Sirena or Irma Mermaid. I honestly don't know if it's translated into English, but this is translated into Spanish from the Italian. So it is a picture book about a mermaid by Antonio Tabucci, and translated by the person that will be in the description box. And so this is my pick for the translated prompt. So that's it for my TBR. I do want to read everything. I loved that I got to pick such different books for every prompt, and I'm excited to start. Go check out the videos of Past Storytime and Heather at Soggy Expect Book Nerd. Go download your PDF for your zine and print your zine. I am planning on collaging the book covers of the books that I read into the zine, so when I do my wrap up, I will show you my zine finished. I hope you are having a good week. I will leave it at that. I will see you in another bookish video, and in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.